Hello and welcome to yet another episode of Simblified. In the last episode, we discussed the technical details behind DALL-E 2. Please give that a listen if you haven't already. This episode will make a lot more sense if you listen to that first.
Hey, does a machine need to listen to episodes in sequence to gain information?
That's a good question. That's a really, really good question. I really want to know the answer to that. How well would it have learned if it didn't listen to the episode in sequence, if it listened the other way, and indeed if it didn't listen to either simplified episode at all? Which of these three models would end up being smarter? I think this is a very, very good experiment. If there are any AI researchers out there who have some precious bandwidth which they want to waste away, you know who to get in touch with. Concept of DALL-E and AI generated art and all that leaves more questions than answers, and we hope to have a discussion on some of those today. For the ethical, the creative, the misinformation, all that is something that we hope to talk about today. And joining me to talk about the future of art are two good friends who are kind of like art movements themselves. Firstly, he's made of relatively small brushstrokes, is quite open. He's always depicted with the right light, uses movement as a crucial element, and was once harshly criticized in France. Is he an impressionist? Nah, he's just impressive. The Monet of Malad, Narendra Shenoy.
Thank you.
And second, we have the man with an emphasis on the individual, clandestine literature, idealization of nature, skeptical of industrialization like all good Mallus. Do you mean romanticism? Sort of. He's the romantic, the one and only Tony Sebastian.
Hey, what an intro.
And Srikeit is not around this time. He is like Banksy. He is missing. He's something like that. Let's go with that. Gentlemen, this is basically a follow-up to what we had done last time. We've been speaking a lot on the show of late about technology's impact on culture and new art forms and things like that. So I just thought we'd have a discussion on this. So what were your first thoughts? I know Naren had some which he raised during the episode itself. When you heard about this, like, okay, machines can now generate art that is perhaps not as good as the best artist, but probably like better than humans can make on average art, in that to a fraction of the time. Like, what was your kind of reaction like? Or was it panic? Was it thrill? Was it...
My thing was, it sort of makes you think about nature of art itself, right? So what is art? And we've come a long way. So back in the day, art used to mean very realistic depiction of things. The more realistic it was, the better the artist was. And then when the camera came along, realism became a little redundant. And then people started experimenting with, expressing what they felt. Picasso took it another step forward where he introduced elements of, cubism and something else. And now, I'm sure...
Cubism is when you paint three of the same picture. No.
Wow.
We should make an art prime. Actually, we should simplify art. That would be the awesomest
That's
thing.
A really good topic. Yeah, that's a really good topic. Yeah. If there's anyone out there who knows this topic so that we can spare the research, please get in touch.
If you think about art, art has a couple of dimensions. So one is, it is the artist expressing himself or herself in whatever medium he or she chooses. And if you've got AI to generate that, and that's not the expression of any human, is it art at all? So that's number one. Okay, it's a bit like saying if the tree fell in the forest, no one heard, did the tree fall at all? That level question. And the second one is, art is also something which gives you some kind of meaning, pleasure, insight into the human condition, whatever. There are many different variations. And if AI generated art gives you any of those or some of those, then is it fair to not call it art? So it's one of those, damned if you are and damned if you aren't kind of situations.
It's good you said that, because it kind of makes me feel like that with every advancement in art technology, it's like we're going backwards in a good way and asking ourselves more fundamental questions, right, about what art actually means, right? There was one point of time when the best technology of the day or art meant painting, right? And I'm sure that pissed off a lot of people as well, right? Like, oh, you're committing memory to this thing. You should go to the place and experience the person or whatever the case may be. And then along came the camera. and people would say, oh, this is killing artists or whatever, whatever. And then you had phones that were able to take photos, and people said, oh, the value of the photographer will get devalued and all that. In all of these cases, it kind of makes me feel like we are dissociating art from a particular form, be it painting or be it photography, be it digital paintings, which also had that kind of criticism. Digital people were criticizing digital artists at one point of time, saying, hey, it's so easy to create images on Photoshop or whatever it is. What's the value of actual hand-drawn sort of things anymore? And now it seems that this new technology, the DALL-E has come along, or AI has come along, and it's almost like every time there is a new thing that clumps all the others together, if that kind of makes sense. And I'm kind of wondering what the next technology that will come along is that will put DALL-E in the same camp as photographers, digital artists, and all that. If that kind of, makes sense.
Yeah.
I think we once had this discussion on Simplified long back, or I was discussing with either Tony or Srikeit, is if you look at the evolution of music formats, right? Don't worry, Tony, I'm not going to talk about music by
No, I was actually going to ask you a question about music, but go ahead.
Tell you the point that I was making. Like every new format of music delivery, not the music itself, has been criticized, right? Saying that it's killing music and is going to kill creativity and whatnot, right? When the vinyl came along, or the earliest records came along, they said things like, oh, it's going to devalue live performances. Then came along the cassette, they criticized it for sound quality or something like that. So suddenly the other two were together, live performances and records were together. Then along came the CD, and then, oh, this is like new digital stuff and it's not going to sound as good as the other. So now the other three were together. And then along came the MP3, and now suddenly all the others came together in a new category called physical media, and then they were clumped together. And then came streaming, and then suddenly all the others were together in this thing called, okay, you used to pay for music and all that, and now you're getting everything available for free. So it seems like with every new technology or a new way of experiencing art, be it music, be it like images or whatever the case may be, it seems like there's a new category of others that is created, if that kind of makes sense. And when you were saying that, Naren, it kind of felt like the same kind of evolution all over again. People, like, there's always criticism of a new model, and I have no doubts that whatever DALL-E or that whole thing becomes tomorrow, DALL-E will be one of the, that was the way things were done before, or something of that sort. I guess that's a future gleaning way of looking at it. Is that anywhere close to what you had in mind, Tony?
Yeah. I mean, some of it. I mean, it's obviously fascinating, if we haven't used that word enough this time around.
Fascinating.
But my actual sort of thought was, before DALL-E, right, there was GPT-3, I think.
Yeah.
And the moment when it like really was amazing for me was when GPT-3 could write coherent text and novels and all, right?
Yeah.
Purely because the grammar of the written text is more apparent to me than the grammar of art.
100%.
Right? So DALL-E, it seems like, okay, whatever. But GPT-3 was like, man, like, it's
it feels
amazing.
like there are a lot more nuances that you have to get right in the written word, as opposed to visual art, where you can still say, oh, that's artistic license and not necessarily a visual typo.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, at least the grammar is more apparent to me, right? But like art, also, I'm sure there is grammar, and if someone's won an art contest, it's probably followed those rules. I mean, at least broad constructs of, right? And so, like, the very first Simplified episode I was on was about crosswords, where I said, like, quick crosswords can be set by a machine, but cryptic crosswords can't be, because it has to, like, the crafting of the clue is a difficult one. And at that point, I seriously questioned, okay, I mean, I don't think that statement is valid anymore. It's only a matter of time before they figure it out, right? And for art, it didn't really strike me as much. But in terms of music, right, what I want to ask you, obviously the form has changed significantly, but is there like AI generated music, and basically it will probably reach a state where it'll be able to find the correct hook step and all of that, right?
In fact that's already happening. Somebody had somebody had trained itself on Beethoven's music and created a new symphony. So I think sometime last year this was, where Beethoven's first song in whatever 200 300 years or something like that came out. And I think somebody also created a few Beatles songs based on the same principle. And again, it's quite interesting when these sort of things happen. So this is happening. So AI created music is already happening for the same reasons that you can think of. Which is,
no, but my question was like, was there like outrage when, let's say, you moved from acoustic instruments to electronic? And is there a similar kind
yes,
of
100%. This was definitely there. So when you moved from acoustic guitars to electric guitars, for instance, this was a big issue. In fact, there's this famous story of Bob Dylan being ostracized at a music festival because he dared show up with an electric guitar. And this is as recent as the 1960s we're talking about, right? So this, whenever, there's something that makes it, I want to say, easier for musicians to translate what's in their head into actual music, there is kind of outrage, which is kind of like your traditional rock snob looks down upon electronic music because to them it's just about, pressing a button and beats happen. Sure, that's one simplistic way of looking at electronic music. But if that's the token by which you're judging this music, then you can say the same thing for a lot of other things as well before this. Like the rock and roll that this snob possibly admires couldn't have been made possible without a lot of studio trickery. In fact, like right behind me is a poster of the Beatles with all their albums, and their most famous albums, or the most groundbreaking work, was, I would say, 50% studio, 50% creativity. The second 50% wouldn't have happened without their genius to put it together. But a lot of the sounds, a lot of the things that made the songs were because of the various kinds of studio trickery that they ended up creating. So this kind of outrage, this kind of discussion, this kind of confusion, etc., has always been there. I'm interesting you ask me this question right now because I'm actually reading a book on the history of music right now, and it's not a very linear. It's a safe
guess.
It's
Chuck reading about music.
About the history of music. Yeah, fair enough. But what's interesting about this is that it's a subversive history of music. So it's not about, okay, this style led to this style. It's more about music, and I'm guessing art as well, has always been pushed forward by the outliers, and that ends up becoming the mainstream. And he gives the example of how blues was initially, played by ostracized communities or by the, whatever, the blacks or whoever, which the white folk wouldn't listen to. Since it was kind of illegal and cool, the young white kids co-opted it, and eventually it became part of mainstream culture to the point where the Beatles were, pretty huge, or rock and roll in general was pretty huge. The artists who were rebels at one point of time ended up being knighted and whatever, getting all sorts of awards and mainstream acceptance and things like that. His point being, whatever these kind of stories that you're hearing, it is not a 21st and 20th century phenomenon. And he then rewinds back to how it was in the days of Beethoven, Mozart and all that. And he says this kind of rebellion, this kind of, outsider perspective has always been there. Whoever was big in music was always an outsider at one point of time, or that art form was outside one point of time. They would always do something that would be outside the traditional norms. So, and that would always stoke discussion, debate. So yeah, I hope that answers the question. I'm not quite sure whether it did, but
I have one more angle on this. So Tony spoke about cryptic crossword clues versus quick crossword clues, right? So quick crossword clues, obviously it's very linear. You just define it, but cryptic crosswords, in order to be a good cryptic crossword clue, not only does it have to be cryptic, it has to be very minimal, elegant, and also solvable in some way. No point in having such a difficult clue that no one can ever solve it. So there is a logic to it. And you can make out when amateurs are setting clues. There are too many, so there are ways you signal an anagram, or there are ways you signal a homonym. So you put a bunch of signals, you over signal, it becomes a clunky. And so my point is that in something like a crossword clue, because it is so complex but uncomplicated. So complicated and complex are different things, right? So it is far more difficult to have an AI do this. And on the other hand, if you think about music, there are some genres of music which are very complicated, like a symphony or a piece of rock music which has a lot of riffs and a lot of beats and a lot of, metal would be one category. There's a lot of things going on. And those things, I would imagine, are very difficult for human mind to unpack it. So you just have one metric. Do you like it or not? And that is much easier for an AI to generate. But somebody just, like really old style blues or a, gospel song, which is just coming from somebody's pain. He or she is just singing. Would an AI be able to, generate that? I'd imagine it would be less likely. So is that a dimension? So even in the visual arts, painting and things like that, if there's always a lot of stuff going on. There are shades, backgrounds, scenery, this, that, and the other. It's easier for AI to pass off as human. But would an AI pass off in the less complicated version?
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Naren. I think it actually wraps up what we said right now, be it music, be it art, be it text, be it crosswords, whatever the case may be. I think AI will do a great job of doing a okay job, if that kind of makes sense, right? We'll set the Tony's analogy of simple crosswords and cryptic crosswords is a great one. I think AI would do a great job of setting a very good simple crossword, but then for that nuance, in music's case, it probably will write a great pop song that will rule the radio for one day, but it won't have staying power. I don't see AI having the power to write something that's going to challenge thinking for generations, like an album like The Dark Side of the Moon or Sgt. Pepper's ever will. So the Beatles tracks, when I heard them back, they sounded like the Beatles. If I'd heard them, they would be like, yeah, okay, this sounds like the Beatles, but it's in something that I would come back to. It's not something to me, what excites me about the Beatles is that each song sounds similar. At the same time, there's a new element to it. They try something different each time. There's a weirdness to each, and I guess that's also the hallmark of a great artist who keeps trying to push themselves and trying to evolve the format. I don't think an AI will be able to do that just yet, but then it's very early days in this whole AI creating art movement. Maybe that's the next stage. But I think
new frontier.
AI does a great job of base level, probably. So I think any industry, and this is art in general, be it music or be it visual or even text for that matter, I think AI will do a great job and will be used in a lot of situations where nuance is not needed. Maybe you just need a stock image or some music for the elevator or whatever.
It's time for us to put the three together, text, visual, and music, and say, can AI create ads? And our agency is going to become
wow, that is the high point of human creativity after all. Yeah, but I think to some extent it can, right, Tony? And if you already see it today, it's happening. So if you see Google search ads, and I'm saying the simplest possible ads over here, if anyone has searched for anything on Google, you would have probably seen those sponsored results on top, the ads, right? What happens today, not forget today, this happened 2-3 years ago. You can enter a number of options and Google will then mix and match a number of these to see which combination of these work best for which audience, which time of the day, etc. This is extremely rudimentary. I don't even know if it is AI per se or machine learning per se, but it's a very simple example of how machines can or technology can optimize very low involvement kind of ad. Now, can AI create an ad that might end up being shown on the Super Bowl or win a Cannes someday? That I am not quite sure of just yet. But it'll probably do a great job of taking the
performance marketing ads.
Yeah, performance marketing. Yeah, a lot of the bread and butter. I still remember, this is, I think, till a few years ago, Google had so many different visual art sizes. You had to create 10 or 15 different banner sizes for a single creative because of all these sizes that Google had. And our poor designers had to sit and make all 17 of them. Adapts, we used to call them. And then along, Google itself came out of the system and saying, listen, you just supply us 2 or 3 images, you supply us text, we will do the, whatever for
logo,
you.
Don't forget the logo.
The logo, of course. And our designers heaved a sigh of relief because what it meant for them is that their work didn't go down. In fact, they were just able to work on better creatives for other formats and all that. So I guess that's one way of I don't know if this is AI per se, but technology is being used in advertising. But I know, Tony, what you meant was something bigger than that, where you can write scripts and all that. I think in Dentsu in Japan or something had hired their first AI copywriter or something like that. And they said it was too awkward.
No, I'm sure you'll see one award submission somewhere along saying this was created by AI.
The submission itself was, for all you know, GPT-3 itself will enter itself as an award saying this was written, this is proof of concept. You want results, bitch, this is the result.
I'd imagine that AI would also be a great help or great thing in situations where brainstorming is required. So, you're thinking of a out-of-the-box campaign and maybe
get ideas.
AI could, it could even replace marijuana.
I've seen in multiple places there. I've seen in multiple play. Wow, did not see that happening. I've seen in multiple places people saying that AI generated art can actually be a great brainstorming tool. Like if you have an idea, you just want to see what it looks like, and maybe that sparks off something else. So that could possibly be a thing. The other aspect to discuss about AI generated art is what kind of new professions or what kind of new art itself can we expect as a result of this. Like when the camera came around, everyone thought that portrait drawers would possibly vanish, which maybe they did, but a lot of people became photographers or image editors or whatever the case may be, right? Every new technology or art form or whatever technological art form has brought along with it a new set of professionals. It will kind of be interesting to see what new creative professions or even creative formats something like AI generated art has, where somebody with zero drawing skills can generate interesting, good images. Now, what does this mean for creativity overall? One of my designer friends, Reva, she has started creating comics that are based on comics which follow a certain theme, but all the images are developed by Midjourney, I think is what she uses. And she has wrapped this entire thing in a very interesting Reels kind of format, which talks about the story of some alien that has come to the planet Earth or something like that. It's kind of interesting to see how various people are already using this very nascent technology. There are some people who have used DALL-E's images and created stop motion art. So you have a model walking down the road and the clothes are completely changing in the space of about 10-15 seconds. There are people who are saying that prompt writing is going to be a new skill, right? If everyone has access to the same tool, then what sets it apart is how well you can prompt DALL-E to create a better image. So for all you know, professional prompt writer might be a huge job description a few years down the line once DALL-E becomes three-dimensional nature, video in nature. So yeah, it's kind of interesting to think about where this could go and what forms it could lead to.
Fascinating, one more time, to use a word that's not been used before.
No, but so basically currently it's owned by someone, or it's just like,
yeah, it's owned by, so DALL-E 2 is owned by OpenAI, who I think now has started selling licenses. I forget for how much, but yeah, now it is OpenAI is very openly been a for-profit company. So they've always been clear that this is something that they eventually plan to monetize. There are others that are open source for now. I think Midjourney is open source. Also, there is also a subscription based on that. I mean, all this computing power, obviously, for Midjourney, for those who are interested, you can actually go to the Midjourney site. They will be taken directly to a Discord server, and everyone who signs up is allowed 25 free uses, after which you need to pay. I forget what the amount is, $5 a month or something like that. So yeah, there are open source alternatives. Some of those open source alternatives are also kind of dangerous because they don't have as much restriction as OpenAI does. Like in the last episode, we ended kind of like by saying that OpenAI's data set doesn't use adult activity, illegal content, porn, and all that. There are some that are that don't have such restrictions. So now you have questions about free speech and all that coming into the picture as well. So that's the thing, right? There are just so many angles. And one more rights-based issue is, suppose one of us was an artist, right? Suppose, Naren, you were a famous painter and your style is very sought after and all that. So suppose using Midjourney tomorrow, somebody says, I want to create this scenery in the style of Narendra Shenoy, and they have what is a very possible original Monet from Malad, right, on their wall. So now, how should you feel about that? Should you feel flattered that somebody is replicating your style? Should you feel you have possibly lost potential 10,000 rupees because you didn't sell a painting? There are some artists who believe that it is their right for their style to be opted out of tools like this, which then brings us to another question. What is patentable? Is a style patentable and all that sort of thing? Because if you go to Midjourney today, you can do things like do this in the style of The Simpsons, for example. Very cool from a, play around, but eventually, what does that mean? Like, should Matt Groening and 21st Century Fox, should they feel like, okay, like, I mean, this is a slippery slope from this to illegal episode that we never released. Again, the question about deep fakes and misinformation and all that come into play over here. So again, like I said, more questions than answers, really.
Yeah. And one thing about technology is this, right? So once you have the tools, all kinds of people are going to use them. You can't stop those being used. Just like deep fakes in the hands of the wrong sort of people could actually, I don't know, they could probably start World War III and, conceivably, or a small riot or whatever it is. And there's no way you can stop it. The only way is when people like WhatsApp University, right? So every nonsense gets passed around. I get the feeling, at least in my sort of, uncle auntie circle, that all WhatsApp users now, news is just taken with a very, very small grain of salt. So maybe they learn that way, but it is concerning for sure. And so that's one. Yeah. One is ideological. One is commercial misuse. One is commercial, you have artists or people being cheated out of things. It's too hazy for anyone, least of all acknowledgedly dumb, simplified host to make any kind of predictions. Yeah.
I also was taken by something interesting that you said, at the beginning, which was, what does art actually mean to us? Like, if you take it to sort of like the logical extreme, like, would you, like, when you have a nice home and you take care of whatever, you very thoughtfully place everything that's in your home, would you have mid-journey developed image printed out and put in a prime place on your wall? Or would you want to put an image that you have paid maybe irrationally $10,000 or something like that for, because it signals something and all that? And I think it is going to somehow defer to the latter. And in some way, I think every technology that was supposed to destroy a certain profession, especially creatively, has ended up making that profession, the best people in that profession, more valuable, if that kind of makes sense, right? There aren't that...
No, but my point about also, though, putting up a painting in your house, then it's not art. It's a showpiece. Okay.
So fair enough.
That could be anything.
Art is used as a showpiece, right?
So that's fine. And putting up an expensive piece of art because it's expensive and it's by a well-known artist or something, it's a signal of your prosperity or whatever it is you want to show. But there is another big category of art which moves you, right? So the work of good literature, the work of good music is to move you. And now the question is, does it mean that because it is machine generated, it cannot move you? And if it does move you, does it make a difference that it is machine generated? So I'm not able to unpack that question, so I have no answer.
Yeah, exactly that, right? Can any of these tools, be it AI generated music, be it Midjourney's images, I think we all agree that it can serve a functional purpose. It goes back to that point we made some time back. It serves a functional purpose, but then can it do something higher than that? Can it move you? Can it inspire you? Is it something that you want to like stare at? And I think that's interesting. And my guess is it's not there yet. Now, whether it will actually get there, who knows? Like, it can generate a beautiful image for sure, but I think questions like this really makes humanity look more at itself.
There's one more dimension. One more dimension is this. Does the knowledge... Okay, so I just show you an image, okay? I show 10 people an image. They find it very moving, or they find it nice, or it stirs them up in some way. Then I show another 10 people that image and say that this is artificially generated by a machine. Will it then move them? And if I say that this was made by a starving artist who was very famous and he died without recognition, will that make it? So humans are so complex.
There are these famous, it's not exactly your point, but there are these videos of world famous musicians who are performing as buskers and people just pass them by. And then you'll find these viral videos on Instagram saying, this guy charges $10,000 a seat or whatever, and he's just playing here and look. So their point being the setting really matters, the setting, signaling and all that. It's interesting. So many questions.
But beyond the functional, right? Like one aspect is when we say functional, we sort of want to say it's probably not high art. But at the same time, a lot of like commercial things are not necessarily high art, right? Like if you look at every superhero movie or every Pixar movie, the formula is the same. You just change the setting, right? Like the story arc is the same. So therefore, like...
Very true.
I imagine that an AI can generate something that is wildly popular, may not be high art, but it is in that sense possible, right?
I think so. I completely agree. In fact, I take your point about music, and I know you touched upon that. It can probably look at what the last 10 years biggest hits were. isolate certain bits, figure out, okay, the chorus needs to come over here, the tempo needs to be this, and create a perfectly good track that will rule the airwaves for a month or a week. But I would go one step further and saying it's going to last only for a month. It won't have staying power. I don't think, like, all these movies are huge blockbuster hits, but I don't think people in 10 years are going to be talking about the last Avengers movie the way we still talk about, like, genre setting movie, like whatever, The Godfather, or maybe the first Avengers movie or something of that sort. And in fact, you can already see this happening, not with machines, but with humans. Like, this is a very interesting study that somebody did who said that if you see Spotify's top hits in the last few years, all of them were super huge for a very short period of time because they followed the formula of what will work. But there's nothing memorable after that. In fact, for 3 years or 4 years in a row, the top song was Ed Sheeran's Shape of You, possibly the last good popular song to be written. And for a period of 4 years, it's not like there weren't other million streaming or billion streaming songs after that. So, and this is with human brains working with, okay, this is what the market seems to like. So to your point, absolutely. I think you will definitely have a whole genre of AI generated, leave brain at home kind of movies. And if that's what works, and great. The way I look at it, that it democratizes movie. If it means that people can watch this kind of movie for 20 rupees, sure, they may not be getting high art or whatever it is, or classics or something at the end of it. But if it means that more people have access to entertainment, great, so be it. I mean, that's the way I look at it.
Yeah, it's a utilitarian sort of argument for anything. Is if it gives happiness to a lot of people, then by definition that is good. And there are problems with that because sometimes they might be really nasty things, and just because the masses like it. So yeah, it's complicated, but
and you can almost imagine that this will be customized also. So to take your thought experiment, Tony, even forward, I might have an AI that generates movies to please me the way I very specifically want it by going through my text. I mean, to some extent, we're already seeing that, right?
Preference,
and it can be interactive as well, right?
Yeah, it can be.
Like everyone starts out with the same first scene.
Whenever I talk about all these future scenarios, if you think about it, there's already some aspect of it which we are seeing today. Like, for example, like personalized movies, if that seems outrageous, you just need to open up our respective Netflixes, and I'm sure all of us have 3 completely different screens, and that's one step towards having a customized show of your own. So I think all this is kind of possible in the future, and I think that we will touch upon that many times in the future in this show. We'll just take another break right here, and we will be back before you know it. And now back to Simblified.
Actually, in one way, I'm not a big fan of Bollywood, but of late, I mean, it's always been the case, but of late, probably because the stakes have gotten bigger and bigger, the money stakes, you find this tendency of movie makers trying to put everything in a movie just on the outside chance that it will appeal to someone. So there'll be one fight, there'll be, fancy whatever clothes, there'll be few really popular music or, music tracks which imitate the most popular. That's why you tend to see all Bollywood music, it sort of tends to sound the same. And there was a time when everything was this crooning, what's that guy, Ankit Tiwari kind of thing, right? So he got a sleeper hit with one of his songs, and every single song after that was a crooning. It just go on, and then suddenly something else happens, and then it all goes jing jing chak chak, and someone else is going that. So in the hands of Bollywood, I predict that artificial intelligence is going to make same kind of movies.
Who is to say it's not already happening?
Who's to say that?
Dear listener, for all you know, there are actually no simplified hosts, and we have just 3 of us are actually just very good machines. That's one way to feel good about ourselves, right? We may be bad hosts, but we are very good machines. Maybe that's one.
No, it's just one machine with
one machine, just one machine with 3 different voices. Wow, even better. In this video, in this particular episode, I'll link out Vox video where different artists are actually reacting to a future with DALL-E, and there's some very nice, interesting thoughts over there. It's 15-minute video. It's definitely worth the watch. Some of the quotes I'm just going to read out from there. Like, if everyone can make these kind of images, what's the new currency? Like, is it ideas? I think that was kind of interesting. Some people might want to create art the old way just for the fun of it, which again, I think is kind of interesting. One person reckons that because you have a tool like DALL-E that can recreate the styles of previous artists, ironically, this is actually going to lead to a renewed interest in learning more about art styles and all that. And I think that I actually already see that happening a lot. I've actually seen more Van Gogh on my timeline because of DALL-E, in a world without it. So that actually might very well be a thing. But finally, it ends with somebody who said this very interesting line, which is everything in art is a remix. Everything in art that you see or hear is built on top of something else. This is absolutely true. Like,
that is so profound.
Like
that
the
is so
EDM
profound.
that you listen to today, you can trace its roots back to, forget rock music or whatever, you can trace it back to Beethoven and whatever, something evolved to something social. It's not just, oh, let's take the guitar and add this on top of that. It's a lot more social, a lot more political. It's very interesting. And I think the same thing for art as well. What we call art just keeps evolving. I think that line was very interesting. Everything in art is a remix.
Very profound.
There's another person who actually, this is an angle I never thought about until I read the comments. Sometimes reading YouTube comments actually can be a good thing. There's a person who actually said he's a blind person and he's been waiting all his life for a technology like this. And by this, I mean DALL-E too. And I'm just going to read that comment out. It's quite profound. I feel like my attempt to get my YouTube channel going or create other types of media have been hindered by not being able to create or select visuals for my content. I recognize and empathize with the concerns of the art community, but I also encourage people to consider how tech like this could open a whole new world of inclusiveness, allowing blind people to fully participate in visual art in a way they could not before. I think that was beautiful. Like, I never considered this angle until I saw this comment.
Lovely.
And who knows what other kinds of art styles will come along, which will help impaired people in other kind of ways. I think this is very interesting. So,
that's actually one fundamental principle of inclusive design, right? That it makes it easier for everyone. Like, the one example that's, I think, most commonly used is like, if you have a door, should you have a doorknob or a handle, right? And you as an able person would say either, right? But if you think of an amputee, you would then say a handle, right? And how does it become easier for you if you're carrying 2 cups of coffee? Which one would you prefer, right? You'd prefer a door handle than a doorknob, for instance. So actually, like it's not thought of often enough in terms of design of anything, is that being inclusive actually opens up possibilities for everyone.
Literally opens up doors.
We
ended on a slightly deepish, thoughtful kind of note, which has been
save the profundity.
It's an annoying habit that we have got ourselves into of late. So not quite sure how to rescue ourselves from this. So Naren, you know what to do.
This reminds me. I'm a big fan of chess, right? So back in the day, we used to get these chess books. And, it's basically different books on strategy, books on tactics, books on things like that. And you buy books and then you play. So there's this very delightful British writer named Gerald Abraham. So he has written a book on technique in chess, right? So technique, there are ways in certain chess positions where you don't really need to calculate everything. You follow general principles that will lead you on to win. So that was the basic central thesis of the book. And he's given back in that time, there were all these, so I'm talking about the early 80s. There were all these, or late 70s maybe. And there were these, this Russian school, the Soviet school of chess, which was so subtle and so so sort of evolved that most of us ordinary folk wouldn't even understand why a particular move was played. Because in chess, otherwise, either you're threatening something or you're parrying a threat. It's pretty, it's pretty aggressive and direct that way. But obviously, if your threat is very, very obvious, then the opponent can parry it. So the line that Gerald Abrahams had written is, there's a diagram and you have to find out the win. So he says, after hours of subtly threatening nothing, one of the players has suddenly emerged with an advantage. Can you find out how to convert this into a win? So this is what I found very funny. After pictures and pictures of garbage, AI comes up with something which is accidentally art. How do you deal with it? So that's
So in any case, I have gone on to Midjourney and I have asked it to develop a picture of ultra crepidarian, and it's come out with a very scary looking 4 people in a grid. That's also because all these generate 4 images at a go so that you can sort of like pick from there and optimize. But still, it's quite scary. So I will possibly put that somewhere in the show notes or something of this episode. So, but yeah, this has been fascinating, gents, as always. I enjoy these chats about what the future of culture, technology, all that will look like.
We have accidentally actually made sense.
I wouldn't go that far, but sure, let's go with that. Let's go.
Yeah, episodes of
So yeah, Naren, you know what to do.
So yeah, stay safe, stay futuristic, and stay simplified. Yeah.